Hello, Feminine Roadmappers. It is Gina here, and I want to welcome you back to another episode of Feminine Roadmap Inspires. And today, our storyteller is Amy Herrig. She is a wife, a mother, a cancer survivor, a recovered addict. She also is a recent convicted felon, and she's written a book called No More Dodging Bullets. So buckle up, my friends. Amy is going to tell us her story today. So Amy, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
It is my pleasure. I cannot wait to hear your story. So why don't you go ahead and tell us about you and your story?
Sure. So I've always kind of thought it would be interesting to write a book and talk about my life because I had what someone could consider maybe an unorthodox childhood. It was beautiful and wonderful and filled with a lot of love. But I was raised by hippie parents, not extreme. We didn't live in a commune, but we had, all the normal amenities of life. But my parents owned and operated what many people would call head shops, smoke shops that sell smoking accessories. And it was in the 70s and then into the 80s. And there was always a lot of drama and conflict surrounding their business. But other than that, I did have this wonderful childhood. And as I got older and life went on, I fell into a pretty rough patch after I graduated high school. My parents divorced, and it kind of crumbled my foundation and rocked my world. And I found myself in a really negative relationship with an abusive boyfriend and a lot of drugs, and found myself addicted to heroin eventually, and was really lucky to survive that and overcome it. He ultimately went to prison, which was a blessing, and I got back connected with my family and nurtured back to health, and kind of went on with my life and just kind of swept that under the rug because I didn't really want to deal with the shame and negativity that was associated with that. And got married, had kids, tried to have this, what I thought was a, normal, successful life, but had still a lot of baggage and shame from these earlier years when I was doing things that were not positive or healthy for me. And it was always difficult for me when I would be places and at parties or social events, and people would be discussing their college years and what they were doing in their late teens and early 20s. And that was really uncomfortable for me because I didn't want to talk about this time in my life. I didn't have the emotional maturity and self-awareness and really just inner strength to use that as a positive and help people. So it kind of caused me to continue down a destructive path in some ways. I had a really beautiful and happy life with wonderful children, and eventually got married a second time to absolute love of my life. But I had all this sort of baggage that I'd never dealt with. And I made some decisions to do things that I thought would make me have a false sense of self-worth. I went to work with my father in the family businesses. By that time, there were several different businesses, not just the gas pipe head shop stores. And I was determined to, make lots of money and be really successful because that would somehow define me in a positive way. Completely false sense of positivity, but we live in a world that sometimes money can matter. I wasn't raised that way, but I sort of lost my way. And anyway, it led to a series of business decisions that, while they weren't completely illegal, there were definitely some immoral decisions made and a lot of money made. And it ultimately resulted in the federal government seizing every single penny and asset we had, in a 17-count federal indictment, my home being raided by the federal authorities, our story all over the local news, my mugshot on the front page of the local paper. And so suddenly all this stuff I had in my past wasn't so embarrassing anymore because it kind of paled in comparison to what was happening in present day. And that was the start of a 5-year legal battle that I really don't know how we fought it because everything had been seized, but somehow by the grace of God, we did. During the 5-year legal battle, I also was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. And so it was just kind of living in constant crisis for 5 years of my life, and also learning to reevaluate and look within and decide what I wanted to do differently, because I had metaphorically dodged a lot of bullets. And we uh, we went to trial and ended up being acquitted of everything but one count. So it was, and that in itself was dodging a pretty good bullet when you're looking at life in prison and 17 counts. One count, and the smallest, less serious count was, the conviction. But so after all that culminated, I just, had a lot of introspection and a deeper faith, a different perspective of life in general, and decided that I really wanted to share my story, and have made it really my top goal in life to live the most positive life I can, and make different decisions, and understand that despite my mistakes and wrongdoings, we've all done something, maybe mine are bigger than other people's, but we've all done something that I could grow from all of this, and hopefully use my mistakes and lessons learned as a platform to not only be the best version of myself, but to help others as well. People who might have done something they wish they hadn't, people that are struggling with self-esteem issues, either because of something they did or something that's happened to them, any sort of crisis or trauma. One book reviewer wrote recently on my book that we've all felt pain on some level, and that's a commonality we all have. And I thought that was really poignant and accurate, because no matter what our story is, we all know what it's like to wish we had done something differently, or to feel pain, or to wish we could have a redo. And how can we learn from these things and move forward? We can't go back. We can only move forward in life, but we have to move forward. That's the crux of it. We can't just stay stuck where we are.
What were some of the things that you found were giving you the strength you needed to go through those 5 years?
I think first and foremost, my faith, but I didn't really know what that meant when this 5 year journey started. I had always had faith. I believe in God. I practice a Christian faith, but didn't really understand how that could work in my life. And I was able to hone in on that more because of so many people in my life that showed me unconditional love and gave me grace and compassion, even when I felt like I didn't deserve it. Or there were a lot of people also that didn't know me, the media and the government and stuff, that weren't giving me any grace or compassion. And when your story is on the media, not only is the media weighing in, but people comment. We live in a world of social media. So, a lot of people had opinions about what was happening to me and what I had allegedly done. So to feel so much love and compassion from people that I knew I was close to, and then other people in my community, particularly parents of my kids' friends and things like that, that reached out and were able to show me that they knew who I was, they knew what was in my heart, and that I was, a good person. Maybe I'd made some bad decisions. That enabled me to understand more about grace and compassion, and what I believe our a Christian faith really is supposed to be about. I think we sometimes lose sight of that. But so it really just opened up a whole new world to me, and a new way of looking at things, and realizing that I could also give grace and compassion to others. I don't think I was necessarily a cruel person before, but I think I was selfish at times, and I would be judgmental at times. I think sometimes that's how we deal with our own baggage and self-esteem, is that we, project it onto others. And so it just opened up a whole entirely different mindset for me, the whole experience. And then cancer on top of it, it really gave me, in the midst of all that, when I was feeling down and like, I just don't know if I can keep going through this ordeal with the government. It just, was beyond stressful. And then to get cancer in the middle of all that, it was another layer of stress, but it also was an eye opener of like, I want to fight to live. I want to really live again. I don't want to be in this funk. I don't want this ordeal and legal battle with the government to define me and bring me down. I have something to fight for and live for. And so it was just a completely life-changing experience all the way around.
Did you go through this legal battle alone, or were you with your family through this?
I was with my family. My father and I there were, oh gosh, 27, 28 defendants total. They indicted all of our managers, some various other people. And it was really about my father and I. I mean, it's our company, but you know, they'll come in and make a bigger production out of things to try and get the case they want and the
Yeah.
deal that they want. And so you know, my father and I went through it together side by side. He's currently in prison right now, serving a 36-month sentence. I am out. The judge staggered our sentences so the businesses could continue, and we have an appeal pending. So I don't know how that might affect things, but yeah.
So
So
how long did you serve?
I haven't served yet. So I will go in after my father gets out. The judge wanted she allowed one of us to be present at all times so the businesses could continue. So,
And how long was your sentence?
36 months as well.
So what part of your journey really has been the most profound for you in defining who you are today and the perspective that you're taking into your life?
I think first and foremost, realizing that we're all fallible and that we all are flawed, but that's also what makes us perfectly beautiful at the same time, because we're all unique and we all are made in God's image. And our faults can also be our strengths, and that we have to accept those things about ourselves and honor where we are and love ourselves. Learning to love ourselves is very important. And I think learning to love ourselves and being in line with God, or you know, whatever higher power you feel there is, I think that's symbiotic, and it all goes together. And I think when we can do that, then we are kinder and more accepting of those around us. And so realizing that I didn't have to be perfect. I just had to be at least working towards being the best version of myself is, I think, what we all should strive to do. But I used to, I don't think I realized it at the time, but looking back, I used to think that, you know, being the best or having the best, or, you know, saying that I, you know, could do anything, and we can do anything we want, but feeling like that I had achieved things, and had certain status, that somehow could define me in a positive way. And really, that's not what it's about. It's not about being like the best of what we can be right now. It's about growing towards the best, because we should always be growing, and we should always be learning, and we should always be trying to improve ourselves. Because I think if we feel like we don't have anywhere to go, then why are we in this life anymore? That's our whole purpose of being here, I believe.
Yeah. Awesome. So tell me a little bit about your cancer journey.
So that was a curveball for sure. Not the initiation of the legal stuff wasn't, but I was 41, and I found a lump like a lot of women do, and I thought, oh, it must be a cyst. I don't have a significant family history. I'm young, you know, and it was determined very quickly that it wasn't a cyst, and that it was cancer, and that it was a rather aggressive type. It had already gone into some of the lymph nodes, and um, it was. There were a couple moments that were life changing during that journey. When shortly after I had been diagnosed, um, they sent me for the scans, the full body scans, which are a normal part of being diagnosed, you know, so they can always confirm that it hasn't spread. And they had initially told me prior to the scans that there was nothing indicating that it had spread, but they were doing the standard procedure of the scans. And then something came back in my blood work that alarmed them and said they had concern that it could have spread. And they moved up my scan dates like to immediately versus a week later. And that was a really, being told you have breast cancer is scary and it's awful. But there's been so many advances made that we are fortunate that we live in a world where as long as it's caught in a certain time, it can be very treatable, even curable. Being told you have cancer, though, that spread beyond the breast cancer is a different scenario, obviously. And so having those scans, and I remember laying in the machine, and it was all day of different scans, and laying there thinking, this isn't something, or it may not be something that can be curable. This could be something that I could be living with forever. And there's this stranger sitting in this room looking at my scans as they're coming through. And, they're going to tell me that I either have something that's curable or maybe just treatable. And that was a really life-changing moment because I had, at that point, been going through the legal stuff about 2.5 years with the prospect of facing life in prison. And it's hard to think about your future or what your life's going to be when you're facing life in prison. And it's really hard sometimes to think, like, why am I living if I'm just going to prison for the rest of my life? Not that I ever wanted to not live, but it's a strange funk to be in. And so then to be told I really could be actually dying, it made me want to fight harder than anything. And it was sort of it's so weird to say this about cancer because cancer is a terrible thing. For me, where I was in my life, it was sort of a rejuvenation. Like, I have something that I can fight for now that I sort of understand. I mean, we don't understand really why someone gets cancer and someone else doesn't.
Right.
But there's science and there's statistics and there's pamphlets and information, and a doctor can tell you, here are your odds. And so I thought, okay, here's something that I have to fight for. I want to live. I want to be with my family. Even if I have to go to a prison and I'm with them from afar, here's something I can win. This legal stuff, there are no statistics, or, well, there are some statistics and they're not good. They're not innocent. Our system, unfortunately, is geared towards the defendants losing, but there are no statistics or pamphlets or brochures or treatments. You're leaving, your fate in the hands of 12 people in a jury box. So it was it was a motivator for me. And I have friends that have gone through cancer, and I respect them so much because it's been a motivator a lot of times for them too. Like, I'm going to conquer this and I'm going to be stronger when it's all said and done. And we are. Cancer survivors are very strong people. So.
And where are you at on that journey now?
I'm cancer free. It'll be this summer will be 3 years this July since I had my mastectomy. And I had a little more treatment after that because of the type of cancer I had. It wasn't chemo. I'd already done all the chemo. So this May will be 2 years since I finished all treatment, but this July will be 3 years since they told me I had clear margins. So.
Wonderful. Congratulations on that.
Thank you. I take a pill every day, and I will for as long as I can. And, that's that. And I feel great. And I just try and stay healthy and do all the things I can do to keep my body and mind in a good place, because I do think that definitely affects it all.
Well, you were under a lot of stress for
Yes.
2.5 years when you got the diagnosis, right?
I was under a lot of stress. I had been on house arrest, so I couldn't exercise or do any of the activities that I had normally had done previously. I was very, very active prior to the initiation of the legal situation. And when you're indicted, the government can move to have you detained in custody until you go to trial. They don't always do that. They did in our case in an effort to put more pressure on us. Gratefully, the judge did not order us to be detained, but as a compromise, he did put us on an ankle monitor. It was ironic. They were afraid that we would flee the country because they had taken all of our assets. We had airplanes and such. So I don't know how they thought we were going to flee. Plus, I would never leave my children and our companies that we were trying to just keep afloat so we could afford to defend ourselves. So yeah, the judge compromised and put us on an ankle monitor. We were taken off the ankle monitor before we went to trial, and actually before I was diagnosed with cancer. But we were on the ankle monitor for over a year, 17 months. I it was, we could go to work. I could take my kids where they needed to be, but I couldn't go to the gym and exercise. I couldn't run, and I couldn't even do anything on my treadmill at home because of the placement of the monitor and how big it was. So yes, I definitely was in the most unhealthy shape of my entire life, and all the stress that was going along with it mentally and emotionally. And yeah, I got the ankle monitor off in October of 2016 and was diagnosed January 2017.
Hmm. Yeah. And I feel like stress has a huge impact on cancer, does it not?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So where are you at in your journey now? And at what point did you write the book?
So when I was on house arrest, I did a lot of journaling and writing. I wrote at that point what was kind of my memoir, and it wasn't really meant for anyone to see. It was more of just like a emotional purging of my entire life. But it was very healing and cathartic. And then when I was diagnosed with cancer, I journaled through that whole journey through the treatment and everything, because I found it, very helpful and therapeutic to express what I was going through on paper. And I thought the whole time that, maybe I would combine everything I'd written and actually publish my story. And so after we got the verdict in October 2018, I sat down and took everything I'd written from my initial emotional purging of my whole life and the cancer journal. And then I had to write everything that had happened from after cancer through the trial. And I put it all together, and it really didn't take that long at that point. I had it submitted to the publisher I chose to work with by March 2019. And then we just kind of waited to actually put it out there until after the sentencing, because I was advised, rightfully so, let's not put, by my attorney, let's not put this out there until, you go through. And our sentencing kept getting postponed. I'm not really sure why. It was a year after our trial that we finally had our sentencing hearing. And yeah, I published the book the very next week. I just felt like that, well, it had been published. We went live with it, put it on the market. I felt like there was so much that I wanted to share. It wasn't intended to be a tell-all about the government and bash the government. I think that's what some people maybe were expecting, to get this behind the scenes look at our legal case and what we really did and what we didn't do, and that is in there, but and and I do think that citizens need to understand how our government works and how our legal system works. I certainly didn't really understand that, even though my parents had had legal battles due to the nature of their business when I was growing up. It wasn't anything on this level, and so I do think it's important that we as citizens understand what the government is capable of doing and how they might go about doing it. But I wanted to share, what I went through with cancer. I think with 1 in 8 women being diagnosed with cancer, I think it's important that as cancer survivors, we share that story and how it was for us, because it was really helpful for me when I was going through it to be able to hear different people's stories. I wanted to share what I went through in my youth and my heroin addiction. I had never talked about it publicly, and I had never, until I had written my story, I had never really followed the path of how it affected, even though I had stopped the drug addiction so many years ago, I had never really examined how it had continued to affect my life, and how basically, even though I had stopped a horrible addiction of that nature, I still would engage in unhealthy behaviors, whether it was unhealthy emotional behaviors or this desire to be basically addicted to money and things. And so I think it was important to share that part of my story. And then just to share ultimately how I've evolved through it all and where I'm at now and how I live my life differently now. I started a nonprofit last year where we serve the homeless in our community out of the back room of our office and warehouse. And so I didn't intend to start a nonprofit per se. I had invited a guy who I'd bought a cheeseburger for on the street to come have lunch in our office break room one day because he was really nice and I'd connected with him, and it developed from there. He brought friends, and then they brought friends, and it was one day a week, and then it developed into 5 days a week, and we serve 200 meals approximately every week and have a small staff now and devoted a whole room in our office to it. They get to take showers, and we give them hygiene supplies and help them get connected with bigger resources to even transition back into society at times. So the whole ordeal just changed how I look at the whole world, and it's not like I'm Miss Positivity all the time and this constant shining bright light who never has a bad day. I have bad days and I have bad moments, and we all do, and I think it's not authentic to say we don't. We're human, but it's how I process it now and how I deal with it that's different. And I think a really great example, and I write about this in the book, is I was talking with my husband about this one day. This was actually a few weeks before we went to trial, so I was still not knowing what was going to happen with my future legally. But I was telling him that I felt so different inside. I felt like that I had grown a lot through everything that had happened, and I was really trying to look at how I wanted to live differently and view the world differently. And he said, "Yes, honey, you're just so pleasant now." And I said, "Yeah." And I said, "Wow, thank you." And I paused because I thought, well, what was I before? If I, but
I'm going to need to know the other side of that comment.
yeah. And I thought, why would you marry me? But the old me would have just reacted and gotten, what do you mean I'm pleasant now? But I paused and I, took it in what he was saying. But and I did say, well, so why did you marry me though? I mean, I couldn't help but ask if I wasn't pleasant before, because my husband's like the most wonderful man on the planet, and he's a very pleasant person. And he just said the most beautiful thing. He said, I always saw it in there. And that's so healing and nurturing and wonderful to hear from someone that I always saw this and I knew that you had this side in you. And he's my husband, so he sees all sides of me. But to say like he could see it, even like, I'm showing it to the whole world now instead of this sort of boisterous, loudmouth, arrogant, even at times, person that I think I used to be. I think people would have always described me as fun and happy and talkative and kind of the life of the party type of girl. And it's still great for me to be those things, but I think I have a much more sensitive and softer side now as well. And I probably used to see that as weak. And now I understand that we find our strength in our vulnerability. They work together.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So what's next for you? Where are you at in your journey now?
So now I am working hard to get our companies continually moving forward. We sort of lived our lives personally and with our businesses and everything in limbo for 5 years because when you don't know, I mean, none of us know what tomorrow holds. And every day is a gift and we don't know, but when you really don't know what your future holds, and you know that it may be completely stonewalled, it's hard to do a lot of forward movement with growth. I mean, I could do a lot of personal growth and soul searching, but um, growing our businesses and making improvements and things of that nature. And now with my dad in custody and me facing a sentence as well, barring whatever happens or doesn't happen with the appeal, there's a lot of sort of catch up to do. So professionally, there's that side of my life. Personally, now my kids are learning to drive. They're 15, they'll be 16 in July, and I'm just so excited to be able to be a part of that, because I spent years of my life wondering if I would miss all those milestones, learning to drive, graduating high school, college, marriage for them. And so it's a little terrifying in the car with them sometimes, as it is, I think, for any parent teaching their kids to drive. And sometimes, I grab the door out of fear, thinking they're going to hit something, even though they're really not. And then that makes them nervous, and I'm nervous. And so I told them the other day, I said, you know what, next time when I want to get scared, I'm going to instead just think how grateful I am to be in this car with you and experiencing this with you, because I spent a long time fearing I wouldn't. And so that's just a very real life example of taking, not that there's anything negative about my kids driving, but taking a stressful situation and trying to turn it into a positive. And I don't know if my mind would have worked that way years ago. I mean, it's kind of a silly example, but it's what I try and do every day in stressful moments. I have the stress, and then I go, okay, wait, how can I look at this as a positive? And our brain is such a powerful tool. And, the old saying, mind over matter, we all say it, and we all sort of know what it means, but it's really a powerful saying that gets thrown out there a lot. But it's true. We can control our mind to have good thoughts. We can control our mind to have bad thoughts. And when I was talking about ongoing addictive behaviors earlier, we we don't have to just be addicted to a drug or a food or anything like that. We can be addicted to behaviors and the way our mind works, and allowing negative thoughts to continue through our minds and not replacing them with positive thoughts can be an addiction in itself.
Yeah, it's like we fall in love with the feelings and the words that we tell ourselves. Maybe the drama and the
Right.
chaos that come with it are also addictive. So, because you were talking about having that heroin addiction when you were younger and then recognizing that there were patterns in your life, what steps or resources have you used to really deal with those addictive behaviors that you were identifying?
So that's a great question, because I think that addiction and how we deal with it is addiction, and steps. Um, Immediately, the first thing that always comes to my mind is the 12-step program, which I think is a wonderful, wonderful program. And I think a lot of those steps and the philosophies that go along with AA and NA, and those groups can be applied to so many things in life, because it's all about accepting where we are, accepting there's a higher power, and then accepting that we want to and need to change, and that we're going to work towards change. And I grew up exposed always to the 12-step program. My grandmother was 25 years sober when she passed away, and had even started a chapter with her, an AA chapter with her third husband, and in the town that they had moved to later in life. And so I can't say enough wonderful things about that program. And the serenity prayer, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference, is a mantra we should all live by, because that's usually where we find our discord in life, and our anxiety is when things aren't happening the way we want them to. And we have to accept and understand this is happening and I can't change it. So how am I going to react to it? Versus this is happening and I can change it. And so what am I going to do differently? And that's a fine line sometimes. And ultimately, the only thing we can change in life is ourselves. And, that's why a lot of times people fall into addiction. The genetics aside, if someone's predisposed to it, that's a whole different thing. But so many people fall into addiction because they can't cope with what's going on around them, and they can't accept it. And we, I think, also fall into negative behaviors, anger outburst, which I promise you, I still have them. They're just fewer and far between. But that's our way of not being able to accept what's going on around us. And so finding that acceptance and finding the desire to look within and the strength to look within and make those changes then can get us more into a place of peace and contentment. And contentment's a huge thing. I used to think back to how I was saying earlier, I thought of if being, sensitive and soft could be weak and vulnerable. I used to think contentment sounded like a word that meant you were settling. And I now know that content is where we want to be. We want to be content and at peace. Happiness is wonderful, but it's a feeling. Anger is a feeling. Sadness is a feeling. I can be happy and angry within the same 10-minute span. Those are feelings that come and go. But being content is a state of being.
I think the word peace is something that has been on my mind continually recently. Just finding a way of being at peace with things as they are,
Mm-hmm.
because the amount of stress we bring on to ourselves by resisting what is in the moment, can be really harmful to our
Yeah.
emotions and our relationships.
Absolutely. It can be harmful to our own psyche and the way we interact with others. It can hold us back. And I tell people all the time, because I have this group of people that come and we serve them lunch in the homeless community. I've had a wonderful gift given to me to be able to sit down and talk with people who are really struggling in life. And we help each other. They might say I'm helping them because we provide this service and a place for them to come. And it's freezing rain today where we are, and they're able to come inside and and yes, but they help me because we're able to share and communicate what each of our stories are, and everybody has a story and everybody has a struggle, and we're able to then lift each other up and help one another, and that makes the whole world a better place if we can just be kind and loving to one another and find that peace among ourselves. And that's what I try and talk about with them, or anyone who wants to listen to me, is try and just find that way to accept what is and what you can change about you, and just keep the mantra I try and say, just as long as you're moving forward. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to have it perfect. Just keep moving forward, though, one foot in front of the other. My best friend since third grade said that to me one day when I was going through the 5-year ordeal. I said, some days I just feel like I'm not doing anything and I need to be doing something. And she said, well, sometimes, Amy, all you can do is get up in the morning and put your feet on the ground and put one foot in front of the other. And you know what? That sounds like something so simple, but for some people, myself included, at times when I was in the depths of despair, that was a lot. And we have to remember that sometimes that's all we can do, and just keep moving forward, and you're doing something.
That's great advice. Well, I want to thank you so much, Amy, for sharing your story. Why don't you tell us how people can get in contact with you and your resources?
Sure. So I have a website that tells people a little more about me and the book. It's Amy Herrig, HERRIG.com. And the book can also be ordered through there. There's a link to Amazon. It can be ordered on Amazon if you want to hear my entire story. And then our nonprofit organization is called Hopeful Tuesdays, plural, because we started it on a Tuesday. Now it's every day. So it's hopefultuesdays.org. So that's how you can learn a little bit about me and what I'm doing, and anything else that you might want to know out there. So.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today.
Thank you. I appreciate it so much. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. So everyone, if you subscribe to my channel down below, I will have links to Amy, links to Amy's nonprofit. Maybe you can reach out to her if it's something that's been on your mind. Maybe she can give you some tips on how to start your own homeless ministry, or how to write your own memoir, or how, just to get through and put that next foot forward. Always moving forward. What does Walt Disney say? Just keep moving forward, right? So thank you so much for joining us today. Again, don't forget to subscribe. don't forget to, just get involved in the community and share this. If there's someone you know that needs this kind of encouragement today, have the courage to share the link and to share the message. Thank you so much for being a part of our community. And until next time, my friends, take care.